So when we think about the lack of progress over the last 2 years in diversity, that's really based off the WFA's global survey, where they've done an interim sort of review over 13,000 respondents, sort of 90 countries and about 160 organizations. And what's been interesting is that's noted that in terms of levels of inclusion, there hasn't been really progress in the last 2 years. And so for us, it's thinking about how do we operationalize improvements to address that.
One thing that stood out is it seems like we often celebrate think changes happening up top in leadership, but the rank and file, so to speak, are not feeling that so much. Can you explain what's going on there?
I think when you see that there are more changes felt and seen by C-suite and perhaps less overtly at the more junior entry levels, it's both an intuitive realization. You say, I can see why that would happen. And that is in part because if you're more senior, you're probably in charge of instituting some of the programs that will seek to make things more inclusive, right? Some of those practical initiatives. And if that communication isn't very clear and isn't felt at the more entry levels, if you are entering your career, that can feel a little less helpful for you.
So what do we do about this as an industry?
So I think as an industry, we unpack it at an organizational level. And what I mean by that is action can be felt most overtly in your teams, in your own core organizations. So what we do at OMD is ensure that that perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion is incorporated into the way of working, right? So into our actual process, from a brief, very practically, when you start off a campaign brief, making sure that you have a spread of representation from different practice areas, but also different levels of seniority, so you have those different perspectives right from the very beginning. And then there are those checkpoints throughout the process, which again bring people together. But then there's also the ongoing kind of programs and actual personal development, right? And what that means is, how do I make sure that if I am leading a project, that we've considered the kind of differences of perspective and skill set, right? And you go beyond the obvious. So it might mean you don't go for the most senior person, but actually you go for the second or third kind of competent person in the room, because that would allow for a more diverse skill set.
How do we make sure that these initiatives don't get deprioritized, given that we're in a sort of an uncertain economy?
I think the way you make sure that efforts around inclusion are not lost at a time when either budgets are being cut or there is an expectation for focus on business results, you make sure that inclusion is part of the business result, right? You demonstrate why having greater inclusivity and diversity of perspective actually leads to better outcomes consistently. That means greater creativity. That means greater levels of innovation, and you show that and you thread that needle so that it's very apparent to internal stakeholders as much as to clients.
Lastly, if we're here, let's say we're back here in 5 years, what will real progress look like in your mind?
If we're back here in 5 years, I have no question that the Beat Retreat itself, right, will be as diverse as it is today. It's probably one of the best examples of what diversity and inclusion should look like. Your question is more around what we seek from the industry. And my hope is that we will see greater fair representation at all levels, right? From junior to mid-level to senior. But there's also a diversity, not just in external signifiers, but also internal ones. And what I mean by that is skill set, right? Capability, and there's also a sense of huge collaboration and belonging. So that if there is a WFA survey, those questions around, do I feel valued? Do I feel that I belong? Do I feel that my work is respected? That those numbers have gone up, right, across those 91 countries and 160 organizations.